Now, I've mentioned before on this channel, I didn't grow up with a whole lot of video games. One of the few I did have, though, was Super Mario Bros. 3. Now, years before I was born, my parents got a NES Challenge set, which of course had Mario 3 as the packing game, so this is one of the few games I actually had growing up. Before I actually go into the review of this, I gotta say that my opinion on this is probably going to be pretty biased, as this is one of my childhood favorites. However, I still want to talk about it, as it's probably one of the most well-known and most well-loved games Nintendo's ever made. Now before I get started, if you enjoy the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing, and now let's take a look at Super Mario Bros. 3. Development began shortly after the completion of the Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2, known here in America as The Lost Levels. Now that game looked and played largely the same as the original Super Mario Bros., and while both games sold very well, it was decided that the new game needed to be something completely different. There would be entirely new graphics, better sounds, better controls, and new moves for Mario to perform. The development team even experimented with a sort of top-down view for gameplay, such as what we eventually got with Super Mario RPG. However, it was decided that this made the platforming too difficult, so the idea was ultimately scrapped. The development team definitely succeeded in making a game that was very different from the previous Mario games, and this new entry would forever change the series. The game came out in Japan in October of 1988. However, due to a shortage of NES ROM chips, American gamers would have to wait until February of 1990 to play the new game, and the PAL version wouldn't release until August of 91, with that version releasing 6 days after the North American launch of the Super Nintendo. While the game was out in Japan, American gamers got their first real look at the game from the movie The Wizard, which was released in December of 1989. The movie was essentially just a big commercial for the new Mario game. As you might expect for a 2D Mario game, the story isn't really anything that special. The Mushroom Kingdom isn't actually the main location of this game. Actually, you don't even visit the Mushroom Kingdom at all. According to the game's manual, the Mushroom Kingdom is the entrance to the Mushroom World, where the other kingdoms that you visit in the game exist. Bowser's 7 children, the Koopalings, have invaded these kingdoms and have stolen the magic wands and transformed the kings into animals. So, Princess Peach and Toad send Mario and Luigi to defeat the Koopalings and return the kings to their true forms. Now, as you might expect, once you reach the end of the 7th world, you find out that the Koopalings were just sent to distract Mario and Luigi. While they were out saving the 7 kingdoms, Bowser snuck into the Mushroom Kingdom and kidnapped Princess Peach. So, after defeating the 7 Koopalings, you need to travel to Bowser's castle and rescue the princess. So yeah, the story's kinda bad, but as it's a 2D Mario game and it's on the NES, I'd say that's completely expected, so it gets a pass here. This game takes the same basic control scheme from the first Super Mario Bros., but expands upon it. You use the D-pad to move left and right, and if you press down on the D-pad, Mario can duck or go down pipes. If you press A, Mario will jump or swim. If you press B, Mario can use special powers he gets from power-ups, or holding B and moving will make Mario sprint. So that's all basically the same as in Super Mario Bros. 1. But, as I mentioned, there are actually a lot of new moves Mario can perform here. If you're swimming, holding up on the D-pad and pressing A can make Mario jump out of the water. Now this is useful for some new level types that have both swimming and platforming, something that wasn't actually in the series until now. Also, holding up and jumping will allow you to enter pipes that are on the ceiling, which again are new to the series here. And if you hold down on the D-pad while you're on a slope, Mario will slide down it and kick any enemies out of his way. As cool as the new moves are, what I love is just how it feels to control Mario. Like, everything just feels right, and I never really have any complaints about things like how Mario moves or how responsive the controls are. Everything just works here. Super Mario Bros. 3 plays fairly similarly to the original Super Mario Bros., where players control Mario or Luigi as they travel through 8 worlds to rescue Princess Peach. Along the way, you complete stages that are filled with enemies and various platforming challenges. So that's all basically the same as the original one. However, there's so much new here that it feels like a game from a completely different series. For the first time in the Mario series, players aren't just thrown straight from one level into the next. In Mario 3, you actually visit a world map between stages, which allows for some freedom in the order you complete stages, even allowing you to completely bypass some. And these maps are great. Parts of the background like trees and bushes can be seen dancing with the music, which is so fun to watch, and each world has its own theme, and the maps reflect those themes. World 2 is desert themed, so the map is a desert with pyramids on it. And World 7 is called Pipe Maze, so there are lots of pipes to travel between the different sections of the world. This concept of a world map has pretty much stayed consistent in most 2D Mario games since. And sure, other game series might have world maps too, but chances are most people would probably associate such a thing with Super Mario, and that's all due to Mario 3. Returning from Super Mario Bros. Are power-ups. All 3 power-ups from the original Super Mario Bros. Make a reappearance here. The Super Mushroom makes Mario bigger and allows him to break bricks and take an extra hit. The Fire Flower is the same as the Super Mushroom, except it also allows Mario to throw fireballs which you can use to defeat enemies from a distance. And there's the Starman, which makes you not take damage from enemies, although you'll still lose a life if you fall into a pit or lava. What sets this game apart from the original is that there's a whole bunch of new power-ups here. The most prominent of these is actually featured on the box for the game, the Super Leaf. For some reason, the Super Leaf will turn Mario into Raccoon Mario. Being a raccoon lets you fly for a short time, and you can also swing your tail to float down slowly, or you can spin your tail into enemies to defeat them. Now, in what universe other than Mario can raccoons fly? I have no idea how Nintendo came up with this. It's ridiculous. There's actually a variant of the Super Leaf called the Magic Wing. This turns you into Raccoon Mario, but lets you fly for the entire stage that you use it on. Separate from the Super Leaf is the Tanuki suit, which turns you into Tanuki Mario. The only real difference from Raccoon Mario is that when you're wearing the Tanuki suit, you can turn into a statue. When you're a statue, enemies will walk right past you without hurting you. Plus, if you turn into a statue in midair above an enemy, you'll fall and usually defeat the enemy. Then, you'll have a couple of power-ups that I personally think aren't that useful. First is the Frog Suit, which lets you move way faster underwater and with way more control. The downside is it's basically useless on land, as you move way slower than you normally do. The other one that I don't generally find that useful is the Hammer Bro Suit. It lets you throw hammers and you can hide in a shell. The only reason that I would say this power-up's not completely useless is that you can use it to defeat boos, stretches, and thwomps with your hammers. However, they are really hard to aim as you throw in a high arc, and I really only use it for this one specific level. There are other items you can use, but those are the basics. I feel that the massive amount of new items is a big part of what makes this game so great. There are so many that you can spend a lot of time just experimenting to find what works best on each level, and I think that's a lot of fun. Something related to the power-ups that's new here are the Toad's houses. On the map screen, you'll sometimes see that the path leads into a mushroom. Well, if you go inside, you'll meet Toad, who has 3 chests. You can pick one chest and keep whatever item is inside. Now, the item you get from the Toad's house doesn't actually get used right away. Instead, it goes into your inventory, which is something else that's new to this game. It allows you to store power-ups for later, and you can use those power-ups on the map screen before you start a level. As useful as the inventory can be, I don't find myself using items from it that often when I play the game these days. When I was younger, I absolutely needed those power-ups, but as I've gotten older, I found out I wanted to challenge myself more, and I usually play the game without using any power-ups at all. However I decide to play, I just love how the power-ups evolved from Super Mario Bros. 1, and it's clear that the power-ups in Mario 3 had a huge impact on the future of the series. One of the major differences in my mind between this game and the original Super Mario Bros. Is the level design. While in the original game the levels were all fairly long, in Mario 3 they're actually kinda short. However, to make up for that, there are a lot more levels than there were in the original. Also completely different from Mario 1 is the theming. Each world in Mario 3 has its own very distinct theme, and the levels usually match that theme fairly well. And this is actually one of the few things that's consistent with the US version of Super Mario Bros. 2. Most of the levels are fantastic, and compared to the first game, there's a lot of variety in the different types of levels. There are levels where you climb to reach the goal, some with both land and swimming sections, and even levels on clouds in the sky. And really, most of the levels are pretty well designed and fairly fun. The only exception I can think of is this one level in World 6. Here, the only way to complete the level is to get to this spot of the stage with the raccoon power-up, grab this Koopa, and fly up to the ceiling in this exact spot. Up here, you'll find some enemies that you need the Koopa to defeat, along with a pipe that leads up to the exit. And this is the only level on the game that is like a puzzle like this, and it feels very out of place. This game also introduces a type of level that's remained a staple in the series, auto-scroll levels. Here, the stage automatically moves and you have to keep up with it. Some of these can actually be pretty challenging. The first of these you run into is actually an optional level, World 1-4. The most notable auto-scroll levels are actually the final levels in Worlds 1 through 7, the airships. So, when you reach a castle at the end of each world, you'll find the magic wand has been stolen and the king has been transformed into an animal. So naturally, you sneak aboard the Koopaling's airship. This ship is a flying fortress full of cannons, missiles, and fire. At the end of each airship, you meet one of the Koopalings, and this is another place where Mario 3 really shines in comparison to Mario 1. In the original game, at the end of each world, you have to get past Bowser. Now, I know it's not really Bowser in each world, but it's basically him each time. While each Bowser fight has some slight variation, they're all similar enough that it basically feels like the same fight over and over for the entire game. Mario 3 fixes this by making the bosses at the end of each world unique. Now yes, the Koopalings are similar, but they're unique in that their attacks and movement patterns are all different. Some of them are heavy, and when they jump they can stun Mario. Wendy shoots these stupid rings that bounce around the room, and Lemmy shoots these bouncy balls at you while rolling around on a ball. Now, while some might argue that in recent years Nintendo's really overused the Koopalings, in their debut title they were really quite an upgrade. Of course, one of the most obvious differences between Super Mario Bros. 3 and the original Super Mario Bros. Is the graphics. In Japan at least, the graphics of the first two games were very similar. So, of course, the development team at Nintendo decided to give the entire Mario world a complete makeover for this new game. Basically, every element from the first two games was completely redesigned. Being a later game in the NES library, Nintendo really knew how to make some good-looking sprites, and it shows! Everything in this game just pops and is so vibrant. This really is, in my opinion, one of the best-looking NES games. And not only is it one of the best-looking NES games, it's also one of the best-sounding NES games. Like the original Super Mario Bros., the music here was produced by the legendary Koji Kondo. Most of the tracks of this game are just so fun and cheerful, and they really fit where they're used in the game. Something I really love about the music is the fact that each world map has its own distinct theme. These are usually fairly short loops, but they're just fun themes that, in my mind, fit so well where they're used. Now, it might actually surprise some people to know that the US version of Super Mario Bros. 3 was actually quite different from the Famicom version. Now, I happen to have both the Japanese and US versions here. I also have the North American version of Super Mario All-Stars, which includes a port of the game. So I just wanted to go over some of the differences between the three versions. So, taking a look at the Japanese Famicom version, there are really three major differences from the US NES version. Now, the first one you might not even really notice. Take a look at what happens when you start a level in each game. Did you see it? On the US version, when the level starts, the world map disappears in a rectangular iris effect, and then the stage fades in from black. In the Famicom version, the world map disappears in the same way, but the level appears using the same iris transition instead of just fading in from black. Why did they get rid of this animation in the US version? The only reason I know of is that the levels start slightly faster than in the Famicom version. The second difference is kinda an odd choice. At the end of the game, there's a slideshow which showcases each world. However, the different world names have been changed in the US version. For example, World 3 was originally known as Oceanside, but it was changed to Waterland in the US version. Or World 5 was originally known as The Sky, but it was changed to Skyland. I personally have no idea why these names were changed. If you do, please let me know in the comments because I'm really curious. And the third major difference actually really changes how the game is played. In the US version of the game, say you're Fire Mario. If you get hit by an enemy, you become Super Mario. Then, getting hit again will make you just regular Mario. Now let's take a look at the Famicom version. As you can see, I'm Fire Mario. Now if I get hit, I become regular Mario? Yeah, in this version, no matter what power-up you have, getting hit will always transform you back to regular Mario. Now, this is consistent with the original Super Mario Bros., so I get why it was like this in the Japanese version of the game. And in this case, I actually understand why the change was made. Now, as I said in my review of Super Mario Bros. 2, the Japanese version of Mario 2 was deemed way too difficult for North American gamers. So I think it's likely that this change, which makes the game easier, was probably made for the same reason that we got a different Mario 2 here in America. Nintendo of America just didn't think we'd be able to enjoy the game if every time we got hit we dropped all the way back to being regular Mario. And just because I understand the change doesn't mean I agree with it. In Super Mario Bros. 1, if we got hit, we dropped all the way back to regular Mario, so gamers were already used to that, so I really don't get why they would change it here. Alright, so now let's take a brief look at some of the changes between the American NES version and the American SNES version. Now, the first change is obvious. The graphics and sound are greatly improved on the SNES version of the game, and of course the SNES version would look and sound better. We also now have the iris transition when the levels load like in the Famicom version, although here it's a circle and it's much faster than the Famicom. And weirdly, the world names have actually been restored to what they originally were on the Famicom. I wasn't originally planning on it, but I want to quickly comment on the GBA version because it is weird. Some things I agree with. They added voice clips, such as when you start a level or collect a power-up, which is pretty neat. However, there were a whole bunch of completely unnecessary changes made here. Like, this first piranha plant you meet was changed to be just a regular munching one instead of where it was a fireball shooting piranha in the previous versions of the game. And there were a whole bunch of spots where I noticed that there were blocks added that weren't there in the other versions. In my mind, one of the dumbest changes that's always annoyed me is that they actually changed the map layout for World 6. In previous versions, you access this Toad's house by going up from level 5. However, in this version, for some reason, you can access it from the side without having to complete the level. I really don't understand a lot of what they did to this version and why they would make these changes. And seeing as I grew up with the original NES version, the changes actually kind of annoy me and I really don't like playing the GBA one. If you know anything about Mario, you're going to realize that a lot of the new ideas from this game carried on to become staples in the series. Things like the world map, Koopalings, item shops, and storing items all originated here. The dancing trees on the map, the bright, upbeat music, and overall energy of the game make this feel just so fun and whimsical, and in my mind, this was really the start of the more whimsical Super Mario series that we all know and love today. Everyone knows this game, and I feel like most people love it, as it's generally considered to be one of not only the best NES games, but one of the best Mario games. Now, I said at the start that my opinion's probably going to be pretty biased as I grew up playing this game. But doing my best to ignore my personal feelings about it, Super Mario Bros. 3 really is a fantastic game. The levels are mostly designed really well, the controls are just super fluid and easy to use, the music is fantastic, the graphics are amazing, really there's nothing to complain about. If by some miracle you've never played Super Mario Bros. 3, you need to try it as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. What do you think about Super Mario Bros. 3? Obviously, it's one of my favorite games, but I'm sure other people probably have some more critical opinions about it. Please let me know what you think down in the comments. Well, until next time, so long.